Hi everyone, welcome back to the English Pod community. I'm Blake, and today we're going to talk about something very important for every English learner: how small mistakes can actually help you become fluent. Yes, you heard that right. Making mistakes isn't bad. It's one of the fastest ways to improve your English. Now, many learners feel nervous about making mistakes. You might think, if I speak wrong, people will judge me, or I need to be perfect to sound smart. But let me tell you a secret. Even native English speakers make mistakes all the time, and they still communicate perfectly well. The key is learning from your mistakes, not fearing them. Let's start with pronunciation. For example, many learners confuse words like live and leave. You might say, I want to live my house, instead of, I want to leave my house. At first, this can feel embarrassing. But here's the important part. Every time you correct yourself, or someone corrects you, your brain learns the difference. Over time, your pronunciation becomes automatic. You don't need to memorize rules. You just practice naturally. Another common area is grammar. Suppose you say, he go to school yesterday, instead of, he went to school yesterday. At first, mistakes like this might feel frustrating. But when you notice them and repeat the correct form, your brain builds stronger connections. You begin to think in English. And thinking in English is one of the most important steps toward fluency. Small mistakes also help in speaking naturally. Sometimes learners speak very slowly because they are afraid of making errors. They pause after every word, trying to be perfect. But English is a living language. People don't wait for perfection. They want clear communication. So even if you make a tiny mistake, like saying I goed instead of I went, the listener usually understands you immediately. Over time, this builds your confidence and fluency. Let me share an example from my own experience. When I first started teaching English, I would say things like, she don't like coffee. My students gently corrected me, and at first, I felt embarrassed. But after a few weeks, I noticed I was saying, she doesn't like coffee automatically. Every small mistake became a step towards speaking more naturally. Writing is also a great place to practice making small mistakes. For example, if you write an email and accidentally write, I have saw your message, instead of, I have seen your message, it's okay. If you review it later and correct yourself, your brain remembers the right structure. The more you write, the more these corrections become part of your natural English. Now, let's talk about vocabulary. Sometimes learners hesitate to use new words because they are afraid of using them incorrectly. You might think, I don't know the exact meaning, so I shouldn't use it. But here's the thing, using the word, even incorrectly at first, is better than never using it. Every time you try, you remember it better. For example, you might say, I was boring at the party, instead of, I was bored at the party. Someone may correct you, but the next time, you will get it right, and your vocabulary becomes stronger. Another important tip is learning from listening mistakes. Sometimes we misunderstand a sentence or a word when listening to native speakers. Instead of avoiding listening, embrace it. Listen again, repeat the sentence, and try to imitate it. Mistakes in understanding are actually learning opportunities. They train your ear to hear English more accurately and naturally. Also, remember that mistakes create memory. When you make a mistake, you usually remember it more than a correct sentence. For example, if you say, I am agree with you, and someone corrects you, the correction sticks in your brain. This memory helps you avoid the same mistake in the future. It's like a natural learning shortcut. Speaking of shortcuts, small mistakes also teach you flexibility. English is full of exceptions and irregular forms. You can't learn everything perfectly from a book. By making mistakes, you discover patterns, rules, and exceptions naturally. For instance, you may say, I eated breakfast, instead of, I ate breakfast. Every time you make this mistake and correct it, you internalize an irregular verb. Another reason mistakes help you improve is that they force you to think. When you make a mistake, your brain is forced to analyze the difference between what you said and what is correct. For example, if you say, I am interested in learning English, instead of, I am interested in learning English, you might stop and think, why is it interested and not interesting? This reflection helps you understand grammar and vocabulary much deeper than just memorizing rules. Making mistakes also improves your confidence. At first, it may feel uncomfortable to speak in English because you worry about saying something wrong. But if you accept that mistakes are a natural part of learning, you start speaking more freely. For example, if you are in a conversation and say, "Yesterday I go to the store and buyed some fruit," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the store and bought some fruit," it is okay. The listener understands, and you can correct yourself naturally. Over time, you will speak with more fluency because you are not afraid of making errors. Let's also talk about idioms and expressions. Using idioms incorrectly is a very common mistake, but it can be very useful. For example, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun today," instead of, "I am feeling under the weather today," someone may correct you. The next time, you will remember the correct idiom, and you will start using idioms confidently. Making small mistakes like this helps you sound more natural and fluent over time. Listening mistakes are another area where learners improve. When you listen to native speakers, you might not understand every word. Maybe someone says, "I have been swamped with work this week," and you think, "Swamped? What does that mean?" At first, you might guess incorrectly. But if you check the meaning and listen again, your brain makes a stronger connection between the word and its usage. Every listening mistake becomes an opportunity to train your ear to understand real English faster. Small mistakes also help you develop problem-solving skills in English. When you speak or write, you sometimes search for the right word or structure. For example, if you want to say, "I am very happy because I passed the exam," but you forget the word passed, you might say, "I am very happy because I succeed in the exam." It is understandable, and it shows your brain is working to find alternatives. Over time, your ability to communicate even when you do not know the exact word improves tremendously. Another important point is that mistakes teach you persistence. Learning a language is not a straight path. There will be moments when you make the same mistake repeatedly. For example, many learners struggle with the difference between say and tell. You might say, "She said me a secret," instead of, "She told me a secret." At first, it is frustrating. But by making the mistake, noticing it, and correcting it several times, you eventually use the correct form automatically. Persistence combined with mistakes leads to mastery. Let's look at fluency in conversation. Sometimes learners pause too much because they want to be perfect. They might say, I think, I am agree. No, I am agreeing. And stop. This slows down communication and makes conversations unnatural. But if you accept that small mistakes are okay, you can speak faster and more naturally. For example, you might say, "I think I agree with you, but I am not completely sure yet." Even if it is not perfect, the conversation flows. And you practice thinking in English in real time. Mistakes also help you internalize patterns in English. English has many irregular verbs, phrasal verbs, and exceptions. For example, you might say, "I bought a new phone yesterday," instead of, "I bought a new phone yesterday." This mistake is normal. Each time you correct it, you strengthen your memory of the irregular verb. Gradually, these corrections become automatic, and your brain starts using the correct forms naturally without conscious effort. Writing mistakes are also very useful. Writing slowly and carefully is good, but making mistakes in writing helps you notice grammar and structure. For instance, if you write, "She don't like pizza," instead of, "She doesn't like pizza," and then review it later, your brain remembers the correct form better than if you had just memorized the rule. Writing mistakes create stronger mental connections that make your speaking and writing more accurate over time. Even small pronunciation mistakes are valuable. English has sounds that may not exist in your native language. For example, the difference between ship and sheep is very small but important. If you say, "I have a big sheep," instead of, "I have a big ship," your listener may understand from context. But noticing this mistake helps you practice pronunciation until it becomes natural. Over time, you will speak more clearly and confidently. Another area is listening comprehension mistakes. When you misunderstand a word or phrase, it is actually an opportunity. For example, if you hear, "I was caught in traffic," and think it means the speaker was physically caught by someone, you are wrong. But learning the correct meaning, "I was delayed because of traffic," strengthens your understanding of idiomatic English. Mistakes in listening help you recognize patterns, expressions, and context more accurately. It is also important to make mistakes in real conversations. Sometimes learners only practice English in controlled settings, like classes or exercises. But making mistakes in real conversations is the fastest way to learn. For example, if you talk to a friend and say, "I am boring today," instead of, "I am bored today," the friend can correct you naturally. Real-life corrections are more memorable than any textbook explanation. Small mistakes help you experiment with the language. For example, if you try to say, "I wish I can go to Paris next year," instead of, "I wish I could go to Paris next year," you are experimenting with grammar structures. Each attempt, even if imperfect, trains your brain to use English creatively. Over time, you will gain confidence to speak more freely without worrying about perfection. Learning from mistakes also develops your self-awareness. When you notice that you repeatedly make a mistake, you understand which areas of English need more practice. For example, if you always confuse affect and effect, you realize this is a specific area to focus on. Self-awareness combined with practice leads to faster improvement. Mistakes also teach you patience. English is a complex language with many rules, exceptions, and idioms. It is impossible to learn everything perfectly in one day. For example, you might write, "I look forward to meet you," instead of, "I look forward to meeting you." At first, you may feel frustrated, but every correction helps you learn. Over time, patience combined with small mistakes builds fluency and confidence. Small mistakes encourage you to ask questions. When you make an error, it often leads to clarification. For instance, if you say, "I am excited about the trip," instead of, "I am excited about the trip," a listener might correct you and explain the difference between exciting and excited. This type of interaction is extremely valuable because it turns mistakes into learning moments. You not only learn the right form, but also understand the reasoning behind it. Making mistakes also helps you with improvisation. In real conversations, you will not always have time to think about grammar or vocabulary perfectly. Sometimes you have to say something quickly. For example, you might want to say, "I have already eaten lunch," but you forget and say, "I already eat lunch." Even though it is not perfect, the listener understands you. Over time, you will learn to communicate clearly even when your grammar is not perfect. This is a key skill for fluency. Let's consider learning phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are difficult because many of them have multiple meanings. For example, the verb take off can mean to remove clothing, or an airplane leaves the ground. If you say, "I take off my shirt," it is correct. But if you say, "the airplane take off," someone may correct you. Each small mistake helps you understand phrasal verbs better and remember them for future conversations. Mistakes also help you remember new vocabulary. For example, if you use the word astonishing incorrectly, saying, "The food was astonishing good," instead of, "The food was astonishingly good," and someone corrects you, your brain is more likely to remember the word and its correct usage. This is because mistakes create stronger memory connections than perfect repetition. Speaking mistakes are particularly useful for learning natural sentence patterns. For instance, if you say, "I have went to the store yesterday," instead of, "I went to the store yesterday," you are practicing past tense forms. Every time you correct yourself, your brain learns how to structure sentences naturally. After enough repetition, you start forming correct sentences without thinking consciously about grammar rules. Making mistakes also teaches you cultural understanding. Sometimes a mistake is not only grammatical, but also contextual. For example, if you say, "I am very full" after a meal in an informal conversation, it is correct. But if you say it in a very formal business email, it may sound odd. Learning when and how to use expressions correctly is an important part of fluency, and small mistakes help you develop this awareness. Listening and speaking mistakes often go hand in hand. For example, if you hear someone say, "I am starving," and you reply, "You are death," instead of, "You are very hungry," the listener can correct you. This correction not only teaches you the correct phrase, but also helps you understand the meaning of idioms. Over time, these interactions make your listening and speaking skills much stronger. Another area where mistakes are helpful is writing emails or messages in English. For example, you might write, "I hope you is doing well," instead of, "I hope you are doing well." When you review your writing and correct the mistake, you reinforce correct grammar. Over time, you will naturally write emails and messages with more accuracy and professionalism without needing to think too much about each word. Small mistakes also build resilience. Learning a language is challenging, and there will always be moments when you feel discouraged. By accepting mistakes as part of the process, you build mental strength. For example, if you repeatedly say, I am boring, instead of, I am bored, and people correct you politely, you learn to keep trying without giving up. Resilience is a key factor in becoming fluent. Making mistakes also improves your creativity. When you are unsure about the correct word or structure, your brain searches for alternatives. For example, if you cannot remember the word difficult, you might say, it was not easy to finish the task. This is correct, and it shows your brain is thinking flexibly. Over time, this creativity helps you communicate more naturally and fluently. Even small mistakes in pronunciation help you improve intonation and stress. For instance, if you mispronounce comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable and someone corrects you, you practice the correct rhythm of English. English is not just about words. It is also about sounds, stress, and intonation. Mistakes help you internalize the musicality of English. Making mistakes also helps you develop better listening skills. When someone corrects you, your brain focuses on the exact words, phrases, and pronunciation. For example, if you say, I agree with you, and someone says, you should say, I agree with you, you pay closer attention to how the correct sentence sounds. Over time, this improves your ability to notice subtle differences in English pronunciation and grammar. Let's also talk about learning through storytelling. If you tell a story in English and make mistakes, it is okay. For example, you might say, last week I go to the cinema and watched a movie, instead of, last week I went to the cinema and watched a movie. Listeners usually understand, and corrections help you remember the correct tense for future stories. Storytelling is a fun way to practice English and learn from mistakes naturally. Mistakes also make your English more natural and authentic. Sometimes learners speak too carefully to avoid errors, but this can make them sound stiff or unnatural. By making mistakes, you allow your English to sound real. For example, instead of saying perfectly, I have been to the market yesterday and purchased groceries, you might say, I went to the market yesterday and bought groceries. This sentence is natural, conversational, and understandable. Making mistakes is also an excellent way to practice different English registers. For example, you might say in a formal email, I am needing your response, instead of, I need your response. Receiving feedback on these mistakes teaches you when to use formal or informal language, helping you communicate effectively in every situation. Small mistakes in grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and listening all contribute to fluency. Each correction strengthens your memory, improves your confidence, and helps you internalize the patterns of English. For example, if you say, he don't like coffee, instead of, he doesn't like coffee, the next time you remember, he doesn't like coffee. You are learning naturally through repetition. Mistakes also help you build stronger English thinking skills. When you make a mistake, your brain evaluates, corrects, and adapts. For example, if you are writing an essay and write, the movie was bored, instead of, the movie was boring, your brain notices the error and corrects it. This process trains you to think in English rather than translating from your native language. Mistakes also help you discover patterns in English that you might not notice otherwise. For example, many learners struggle with articles. You might say, I went to store yesterday, instead of, I went to the store yesterday. At first, this mistake feels small, but noticing it repeatedly helps you understand when and how to use a, an, and the. Over time, using articles correctly becomes second nature because your brain has learned through experience. Making mistakes also teaches you how to repair your own English in real time. For instance, if you say, I understand what you mean, instead of, I understand what you mean, you can catch yourself mid-sentence and correct it. This self-correction is a key skill for fluency because it allows you to speak naturally, even when your English is not perfect. Another benefit of mistakes is that they improve your memory. When you make an error, your brain pays more attention to the correction. For example, if you say, I was very boring yesterday, instead of, I was very bored yesterday, the correction sticks in your mind. Every time you remember the correct form, you are training your brain to use English automatically. Mistakes also help you become more creative with language. Sometimes you do not know the exact word, so you describe it differently. For example, if you want to say, I was exhausted after work, but you forget the word exhausted, you might say, I was very tired after work. This is correct and shows your brain is flexible. Over time, this creativity allows you to communicate clearly even when you do not know every word. Small mistakes in pronunciation can make a huge difference. For instance, if you say, "I like to sheet music," instead of, "I like to read sheet music," it can confuse listeners. But every time someone corrects you, or you notice the error yourself, your brain learns the correct sounds and rhythm of English. Pronunciation mistakes teach you to speak clearly and confidently. Mistakes also teach you how to use English in different contexts. For example, you might say, "Can you borrow me your pen?" instead of, "Can you lend me your pen?" This mistake shows that you need to understand context-specific words. Over time, you learn which verbs, phrases, and expressions are appropriate in conversation, emails, or formal situations. Another important aspect is that mistakes improve your listening comprehension. For example, if someone says, "I am looking forward to meeting you," and you think they said, "I am looking forward to eat you," you have misunderstood. When you realize the mistake and listen carefully again, your brain strengthens its ability to catch subtle differences in English pronunciation and meaning. Mistakes also help you develop problem-solving skills in English. For instance, if you want to explain a complex idea and forget the exact word, you find another way to express it. You might say, "I was feeling very happy and excited because the event was very good," instead of, "I was thrilled because the event was excellent." This skill of finding alternatives improves your fluency and confidence over time. Making mistakes also helps you interact naturally with native speakers. People expect learners to make errors, and most are happy to correct you politely. For example, if you say, "She don't want to go to the party," someone might say, "You should say, 'She doesn't want to go to the party.'" This interaction is one of the most effective ways to improve your English because it is practical, memorable, and engaging. Mistakes also teach you resilience in learning. English has many irregular verbs, exceptions, and tricky rules. For example, you might repeatedly say, "I have went to the store," instead of, "I have gone to the store." At first, this can feel discouraging, but each correction builds your mental strength and determination to continue improving. Resilience combined with small mistakes leads to long-term fluency. Small mistakes help you think in English rather than translate from your native language. For example, instead of thinking, "In my country, we say this, so I should say the same," in English, you try to form the sentence in English directly. You might say, "I have 25 years," instead of, "I am 25 years old." Each correction teaches you the natural English structure and helps your brain think in English automatically. Another benefit is that mistakes improve your ability to guess meaning from context. For example, if you hear, "The lecture was quite challenging," and you do not know the word challenging, you might guess it means interesting or difficult. Even if your guess is partially wrong, trying to understand context helps you develop natural listening skills. Over time, this improves your ability to follow English in movies, podcasts, and conversations. Making mistakes also builds social confidence. Many learners are afraid to speak because they think they must be perfect. For example, you might want to say, "I am nervous about speaking in public," but say, "I am nervously about speaking in public." Even though it is slightly wrong, the listener understands, and you practice expressing your thoughts. With repeated practice, your confidence grows, and speaking becomes more natural. Mistakes also help you learn the correct word order in English. For instance, you might say, "I yesterday went to the park," instead of, "I went to the park yesterday." Each correction teaches your brain the correct sentence pattern. Over time, you start forming sentences automatically with the correct word order, which is essential for fluency. Small mistakes in phrasal verbs also teach you natural expressions. For example, you might say, "I need to turn down the light," instead of, "I need to turn off the light." Every correction helps you understand which phrasal verbs are appropriate in each context. Using phrasal verbs correctly makes your English sound more natural and fluent. Making mistakes also teaches you to pay attention to subtle differences in meaning. For example, you might confuse borrow and lend and say, "Can you borrow me your book?" instead of, "Can you lend me your book?" By noticing this mistake, you learn not only the words, but also the context in which to use them. Over time, your English becomes more precise and accurate. Mistakes also help you practice fluency under pressure. When speaking with native speakers, you cannot pause to think about every grammar rule. If you say, "Yesterday I go to the shop and buy some milk," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the shop and bought some milk," it is okay. The listener understands, and you gain experience speaking naturally, even when your English is imperfect. Small mistakes also improve your ability to self-correct. For example, if you say, "He don't like ice cream," you might notice immediately and correct yourself to, "He doesn't like ice cream." Self-correction trains your brain to notice patterns and strengthens your fluency over time. We are now diving deeper into how mistakes can accelerate fluency in reading and writing. For instance, when reading a text, you might misinterpret a sentence. If you read, "The movie was breathtaking," and think it means the movie was scary, you might misread context. When you look up the meaning and realize it means amazing or wonderful, this small mistake helps you remember the word more effectively. Each time you correct a reading misunderstanding, your vocabulary and comprehension improve naturally. Mistakes in writing also create learning opportunities. For example, you might write, "I am interested in learning English," instead of, "I am interested in learning English." When you review your writing and notice the mistake, it is more memorable than simply memorizing rules from a textbook. This is why practice and making mistakes are so effective. Small mistakes also help you remember phrasal verbs. For example, if you say, "I look after my cat" correctly, but then later say, "I look for my cat" incorrectly in the wrong context, you notice the difference. Over time, your brain learns how to use phrasal verbs naturally without needing to think too much. Mistakes also improve your ability to use English creatively. Sometimes you do not know the exact word, so you try to explain it differently. For example, if you want to say, "I am very tired after a long day," but forget the word tired, you might say, "I feel very low energy after a long day." This is correct and understandable. Over time, these small improvisations help you think in English and communicate ideas even when you do not know every word. Small mistakes help you learn informal expressions and everyday English. For example, you might say, "I am very happy," but a native speaker might say, "I am thrilled." If you use the word thrilled incorrectly, someone can correct you, and you learn how to express feelings naturally. Using small mistakes in casual conversations helps you sound more fluent and less like a textbook speaker. Making mistakes also strengthens your memory of English grammar patterns. For example, you might say, "I have saw that movie," instead of, "I have seen that movie." Each time you correct this mistake, you train your brain to recognize the correct past participle forms. Eventually, forming correct sentences becomes automatic. Mistakes in pronunciation also help you improve intonation and rhythm. For instance, if you say, "I'm going to the store tomorrow," but stress the words incorrectly, a listener may still understand you. When you notice this mistake and practice stressing the words naturally, your English starts to sound more fluent and natural. Pronunciation mistakes are opportunities to fine-tune your speaking skills. Small mistakes also improve your reading comprehension. When you misinterpret a sentence while reading, it forces you to think critically. For example, if you read, "She was over the moon about her promotion," and think it means she was angry, checking the meaning helps you understand idioms better. Over time, this improves your ability to understand English in books, articles, and online content. Making mistakes helps you develop problem-solving skills in real conversations. For example, if you forget the word appointment while speaking, you might say, "I have a meeting with the doctor," instead. This is correct, and your brain learns how to find alternative ways to communicate effectively. The more you do this, the more confident you become in real-life situations. Mistakes also help you understand subtle differences between words. For example, many learners confuse listen and hear. You might say, "I hear carefully to the teacher," instead of, "I listen carefully to the teacher." Each time you correct this mistake, you strengthen your understanding of verb usage in English. Small mistakes in writing also reinforce learning. For instance, if you write, "She don't like chocolate," instead of, "She doesn't like chocolate," reviewing and correcting the error strengthens your mental grammar patterns. Over time, you will write with greater accuracy without thinking consciously about every sentence. Mistakes also improve your ability to guess meaning from context. For example, if someone says, I am feeling under the weather today, and you think it means they are angry, you might ask, are you upset? When you learn that it means they are sick, your understanding of idioms and context improves. This skill is very important for advanced listening and conversation. Making mistakes builds resilience and patience. English is not a language that can be mastered overnight. For example, if you repeatedly say, I have went to the market, instead of, I have gone to the market, you might feel frustrated at first. But each correction strengthens your ability to learn and adapt. Mistakes are not failures. They are steps toward fluency. Small mistakes also encourage self-correction. For example, if you say, he don't like football, and notice it immediately, you might correct yourself to, he doesn't like football. This self-awareness trains your brain to notice patterns, which is an essential skill for advanced learners who want to speak fluently without constant external correction. Mistakes also help you experiment with English in different ways. For example, if you are unsure how to say, I am very interested in this topic, you might say, I am very like this topic. Even though it is incorrect, your brain is exploring ways to express the idea. Over time, experimenting helps you develop a natural and flexible command of English. Small mistakes in conversation teach you active listening. For instance, if someone corrects your sentence, you pay close attention to their words, pronunciation, and sentence structure. For example, if you say, I am boring today, and someone replies, you should say, I am bored today. Your brain registers both the correct word and how it is used. Active listening combined with mistakes improves your fluency. Making mistakes also helps you understand the cultural use of English. Sometimes errors are not only grammatical, but also contextual. For example, if you say, I am very full after a meal in a casual conversation, it is fine. But if you say it in a formal email, it might sound strange. Making mistakes teaches you how English is used in different contexts, improving both fluency and appropriateness. Mistakes also teach you to paraphrase naturally. If you do not know the exact word, you find other ways to explain your meaning. For example, instead of saying, I am exhausted, you might say, I am very tired after a long day. This skill allows you to communicate effectively even when your vocabulary is limited. Over time, your English becomes more versatile and fluent. Small mistakes in vocabulary usage also strengthen understanding. For example, you might say, I was boring at the party, instead of, I was bored at the party. Every time someone corrects you or you notice the mistake yourself, your understanding of adjectives and emotions improves. This makes your spoken English sound more natural. Mistakes also improve fluency under real pressure. When you speak with native speakers, you cannot always pause to think. If you say, yesterday I go to the park and bought some fruit, instead of, yesterday I went to the park and bought some fruit, it is okay. The listener understands, and the experience trains you to speak clearly and naturally without worrying about perfection. Making mistakes also strengthens your ability to connect ideas logically in English. For example, if you say, I like pizza because it is tasty, someone might correct you to, I like pizza because it is tasty. These small corrections help you understand how sentences flow naturally in English, which is essential for advanced learners aiming for fluency. Small mistakes in pronunciation teach rhythm and intonation. For instance, if you mispronounce comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable, practicing the correct pronunciation helps your sentences sound natural. English is a musical language, and mistakes allow you to fine-tune your speech patterns. Mistakes also help you notice subtle grammar points. For example, you might confuse much and many and say, I have much friends, instead of, I have many friends. Each time you correct it, you internalize grammar rules naturally. Over time, using correct grammar becomes second nature. Making mistakes builds confidence in social situations. For example, you might hesitate to join a conversation because you are afraid of saying something wrong. If you accept small mistakes, you can say, I think this movie is very interesting, even if you initially said, I think this movie is very exciting. Each successful attempt builds confidence and fluency. Small mistakes also improve your ability to summarize and explain ideas. For example, if you forget a word while speaking, you might describe it instead. You could say, the place where you can borrow books from a library, instead of saying library immediately. This process strengthens your ability to communicate flexibly and fluently. Mistakes also teach you how to use English more flexibly. For example, if you want to say, I am very nervous about the meeting, but you accidentally say, I am very nervously about the meeting, the listener will still understand. Each time you notice the mistake and correct it, your brain internalizes the correct form. Over time, this flexibility allows you to express yourself naturally in any situation. Making mistakes also helps you understand collocations, which are words that naturally go together. For example, you might say, I did a mistake, instead of, I made a mistake. These small errors teach you which words pair correctly. Collocations are very important in advanced English because they make your speech sound natural and fluent. Small mistakes improve your listening comprehension in real conversations. For instance, if someone says, I am thrilled with the results, and you think they said, I am filled with the results, you might misunderstand. When you check the meaning and listen again, your brain strengthens its ability to understand idiomatic expressions and subtle differences in English. Mistakes also help you develop critical thinking in English. For example, if you write, I am interested in learning languages, instead of, I am interested in learning languages, you start thinking about why the correction is necessary. This reflection deepens your understanding of English grammar and sentence structure. Making mistakes allows you to explore informal and conversational English. For example, you might say, I am very happy today, but a native speaker might say, I am over the moon today. If you use the phrase incorrectly, someone can correct you, and you learn to express yourself more naturally. Learning through small errors helps your English sound authentic rather than textbook-like. Mistakes also help you become better at paraphrasing. For example, if you cannot remember the word delighted, you might say, I am very happy about the news. Even though it is not the exact word, your brain practices finding alternative ways to express ideas. Over time, this improves your fluency and flexibility in English. Small mistakes in pronunciation help you improve rhythm and stress patterns. For example, if you say comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable, practicing the correct stress and rhythm makes your speech sound more natural. English is a musical language, and mistakes allow you to fine-tune your intonation. Making mistakes also improves your ability to ask questions in English. For instance, if you say, do you can help me with this problem? Instead of, can you help me with this problem? And someone corrects you, you learn the correct structure. Asking questions correctly is essential for advanced learners because it allows you to engage fully in conversations and clarify information, small. Mistakes also teach you how to handle misunderstandings politely. For example, if you say, I misunderstood what you said about the project, someone might explain it again. Each time you navigate a misunderstanding, you build confidence and fluency in real-life communication. Making mistakes strengthens your ability to explain ideas clearly. For example, if you forget a word in a sentence, you might say, the thing you used to write on paper, instead of saying pen. Over time, your brain learns to express ideas even when you do not know the exact vocabulary. This skill is crucial for advanced fluency. Small mistakes also help you learn irregular verbs. For example, you might say, I have went to the store, instead of, I have gone to the store. Each time you correct the mistake, you reinforce the irregular form in your memory. Mastering irregular verbs is essential for advanced learners because they are used frequently in both spoken and written English. Making mistakes helps you practice speaking under pressure. In real-life situations, you cannot always pause to think about grammar or vocabulary. For example, if you say, yesterday I go to the cinema and watch a movie, instead of, yesterday I went to the cinema and watched a movie, the listener still understands. Practicing under pressure allows you to speak fluently and naturally. Mistakes also teach you about nuance in English. For example, many learners confuse borrow and lend. You might say, can you borrow me your book? Instead of, can you lend me your book? Each correction helps you understand subtle differences between words and their proper usage, which is essential for advanced fluency. Small mistakes improve your ability to self-correct in real time. For example, if you say, he don't like coffee, and notice it immediately, you can say he doesn't like coffee. This process strengthens your fluency because you learn to monitor your own speech without relying on others to correct you. Making mistakes also encourages you to engage more with English materials. For example, if you misread a sentence in a book, you are motivated to check the meaning. This could be a sentence like, "The situation was escalating rapidly," which you initially understand incorrectly. By checking the meaning, you improve your vocabulary, comprehension, and overall fluency. Small mistakes also improve your ability to use English idioms correctly. For example, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun," instead of, "I am feeling under the weather," someone may correct you. Each correction helps you remember idioms and how to use them naturally in conversation. Idioms are a key part of sounding fluent in English. Making mistakes helps you learn the correct use of articles. For instance, you might say, "I went to store yesterday," instead of, "I went to the store yesterday." Each time you correct this error, you internalize the correct usage of a, an, and the. Articles are tricky for advanced learners, and mistakes make this learning process natural. Small mistakes in verb tense usage teach you how to express time accurately. For example, you might say, "I am going to the market yesterday," instead of, "I went to the market yesterday." Correcting these errors helps you internalize the rules of past, present, and future tenses. Over time, forming correct tense structures becomes automatic. Making mistakes also helps you practice advanced vocabulary. For example, if you use the word astonishing incorrectly in a sentence like, "The food was astonishing good," instead of, "The food was astonishingly good," you learn the correct adverbial form. Over time, using vocabulary accurately becomes second nature. Small mistakes also improve your listening and speaking connection. For instance, if you hear, "I am swamped with work," and reply, "You are drowned in work," instead of, "You are overwhelmed with work," the correction helps you understand idiomatic phrases and improves your ability to respond naturally in conversation. Making mistakes strengthens your ability to summarize and explain ideas in English. For example, if you forget the word library, you might say, "The place where you borrow books," instead. This process teaches you to communicate effectively, even when you do not know the exact word, which is crucial for fluency. Small mistakes also help you internalize sentence patterns. For example, if you say, "I yesterday went to the park," instead of, "I went to the park yesterday," each correction reinforces the natural order of English sentences. Over time, you start forming correct sentences automatically without thinking about rules. Mistakes also teach you to adapt English to different social contexts. For example, saying, "I am very full," is fine in casual conversation. But in a formal email, you might say, "I have eaten enough for today." Mistakes teach you the nuances of formal and informal English. Making mistakes encourages you to practice self-reflection. For instance, if you mispronounce a word or use grammar incorrectly, reflecting on the mistake helps you notice patterns and areas to improve. Over time, this reflection strengthens your fluency and confidence in English. Small mistakes also improve your ability to think quickly in English. For example, if someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" and you forget the past tense of go, you might say, "I go to the cinema yesterday." Correcting yourself to, "I went to the cinema yesterday," teaches your brain to respond quickly and correctly under pressure. Mistakes also teach you how to use English more creatively in conversation. For example, if you want to say, "I was very tired after the long meeting," but you accidentally say, "I was very tiring after the long meeting," a listener might correct you. Each correction teaches your brain the correct verb form. Over time, your ability to form sentences correctly in spontaneous conversation becomes automatic. Small mistakes also help you learn phrasal verbs more effectively. For instance, you might say, "I am looking up the answer in the dictionary," which is correct, but later say, "I am looking after the answer in the dictionary," which is incorrect. Being corrected helps you understand the exact meaning of phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are tricky because many have multiple meanings, and making mistakes is a natural way to master them. Mistakes improve your understanding of idioms and natural expressions. For example, if you say, "I am on cloud 7," instead of, "I am on cloud 9," a native speaker will likely correct you. Each time you notice the correct expression, your English becomes more natural and expressive. Idioms are often used in casual conversation, and making small mistakes is a powerful way to remember them. Making mistakes also helps you refine your grammar skills. For instance, if you write, "She don't like chocolate," instead of, "She doesn't like chocolate," noticing and correcting the mistake reinforces subject-verb agreement in your memory. Over time, forming correct sentences becomes second nature, even under pressure in conversation. Small mistakes in pronunciation are opportunities for improvement. For example, if you say comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable, you may be corrected by a listener or notice it yourself. Practicing the correct stress and rhythm makes your speech sound fluent and natural. Mistakes in pronunciation teach you to pay attention to subtle differences in English sounds. Mistakes also encourage you to engage actively with English materials. For example, if you misread a sentence in a book like, "The event was riveting," and think it means boring, checking the meaning helps you understand vocabulary better. Each time you correct a misunderstanding, your vocabulary and comprehension grow stronger. Making mistakes helps you develop problem-solving skills in English. For example, if you forget a word while speaking, you might describe it instead. You could say, "the thing you used to write on paper," instead of pen. Over time, this skill allows you to communicate effectively even without knowing every word. This flexibility is crucial for advanced fluency. Small mistakes also help you practice using English in different contexts. For instance, if you say, "Can you borrow me your notes?" instead of, "Can you lend me your notes?" the correction teaches you the proper usage of verbs depending on context. Understanding context-specific language makes your English more accurate and natural. Mistakes also build resilience in language learning. English is full of irregular verbs, exceptions, and subtle rules. For example, you might repeatedly say, "I have went to the store," instead of, "I've gone to the store." Each correction strengthens your determination and helps you accept that mistakes are a necessary part of learning. Resilience combined with small mistakes leads to consistent improvement. Small mistakes improve your ability to self-correct in conversation. For example, if you say, "He don't like ice cream," and notice it immediately, you can say, "He doesn't like ice cream." This practice trains your brain to monitor speech, notice patterns, and correct yourself naturally. Self-correction is a crucial skill for advanced English fluency. Making mistakes also improves your ability to summarize ideas in English. For instance, if you forget the word library, you might say, "the place where you can borrow books." This teaches you to express ideas clearly even when your vocabulary is limited. Summarizing and explaining ideas in different ways strengthens communication skills. Small mistakes also help you develop critical thinking in English. For example, if you write, "I am interested in learning languages," instead of, "I am interested in learning languages," you reflect on why the correction is necessary. This reflection helps you understand grammar patterns deeply and improves your ability to use English independently. Mistakes help you build fluency under real-life pressure. When speaking with native speakers, you cannot always pause to think. If you say, "Yesterday I go to the cinema and watch a movie," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the cinema and watched a movie," the listener still understands. Over time, practicing under pressure allows you to speak naturally without fear of errors. Small mistakes teach you how to use idiomatic expressions correctly. For instance, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun," instead of, "I am feeling under the weather," you learn the correct expression through correction. Idioms are often confusing, but small mistakes help you internalize them for natural conversation. Making mistakes also improves your ability to handle different registers of English. For example, saying, "I am very full," is fine in casual conversation. But in a formal setting, you might say, "I have eaten enough for today." By making mistakes, you learn which language fits casual, formal, or professional contexts. Small mistakes in vocabulary help you learn the correct nuances of English words. For example, you might say, "I was boring at the party," instead of, "I was bored at the party." Each correction reinforces proper usage, making your spoken and written English more precise and natural. Mistakes also help you develop confidence in social interactions. For example, you might hesitate to speak because you are afraid of making errors. If you accept small mistakes and say, "I think this movie is very interesting," even if you initially said, "I think this movie is very exciting," your confidence grows. Speaking regularly despite mistakes builds fluency. Making mistakes teaches you how to adapt your English in real conversations. For example, if you forget a word, you might describe it. You could say, "the place where you borrow books," instead of "library." This teaches flexibility and strengthens your ability to communicate effectively. Even when you are unsure, small mistakes also help you internalize sentence patterns naturally. For example, if you say, "I yesterday went to the park," instead of, "I went to the park yesterday," Repeated correction reinforces natural English sentence structure. Over time, forming correct sentences becomes automatic. Mistakes also teach you how to think quickly in English. For instance, if someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" and you forget the past tense of go, you might say, "I go to the cinema yesterday." Correcting yourself to, "I went to the cinema yesterday," trains your brain to respond correctly under pressure. Small mistakes in writing improve your understanding of grammar. For example, if you write, "She don't like coffee," instead of, "She doesn't like coffee," noticing and correcting it strengthens your grasp of subject-verb agreement. Over time, writing correct sentences becomes natural. Making mistakes helps you learn advanced vocabulary more effectively. For instance, if you write, "The performance was astonishing good," instead of, "The performance was astonishingly good," reviewing the mistake reinforces proper usage. Over time, accurate vocabulary use becomes automatic. Small mistakes also improve your ability to connect ideas logically. For example, if you say, "I like pizza because it is tasty," someone might correct you to, "I like pizza because it is tasty." These corrections teach you natural sentence flow, which is crucial for fluent speech and writing. Mistakes in pronunciation help you sound more natural. For example, if you say comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable, practicing stress and rhythm improves fluency. Pronunciation mistakes are opportunities to develop clear, confident speech. Small mistakes also teach you how to use English creatively. For example, if you forget the word exhausted, you might say, "I am very tired after the meeting," which is correct. Over time, these alternatives help you communicate effectively, even when you do not know the exact vocabulary. Small mistakes also help you improve your ability to adapt English to different situations. For example, if you want to say, "I am very tired after the long journey," but you accidentally say, "I am very tiring after the long journey," the listener will likely understand, but the correction teaches you the correct verb form. Each time you notice and fix this, your brain reinforces proper usage, and over time, you speak correctly without thinking. Mistakes also help you learn prepositions naturally. For instance, you might say, "I am interested on this book," instead of, "I am interested in this book." Repeatedly correcting these small errors allows you to internalize the rules for prepositions without memorizing them from a textbook. Prepositions are difficult for advanced learners, and mistakes are an effective way to master them. Making mistakes improves your ability to use complex sentence structures. For example, you might say, "I went to the store, I bought apples," instead of, "I went to the store and I bought apples." Each time you notice and correct the mistake, you learn how to connect ideas logically, which is essential for advanced fluency. Small mistakes also help you practice using conditionals. For example, you might say, "If I will go to the party, I see my friends," instead of, "If I go to the party, I will see my friends." Correcting these errors teaches your brain how to form accurate conditional sentences automatically. Mistakes in pronunciation are very important for improving communication. For example, if you say dessert as desert, it can confuse listeners. Every correction you receive helps you distinguish sounds, improving your clarity. Over time, this builds confidence in speaking and ensures that people understand you clearly. Making mistakes also strengthens your writing skills. For instance, if you write, "I have went to the market," instead of, "I have gone to the market," reviewing and correcting this mistake helps you internalize irregular verbs. Writing and revising your mistakes reinforces grammar, vocabulary, and fluency in both written and spoken English. Small mistakes also help you become better at listening. For example, if someone says, "I am overjoyed about the news," and you hear, "I am overjoyed about the shoes," realizing the error forces you to listen more carefully. Mistakes like this improve your ability to understand English quickly and accurately. Mistakes also teach you how to use adjectives and adverbs properly. For example, you might say, "I am boring about the movie," instead of, "I am bored about the movie." Each correction helps you understand the correct form and placement of adjectives and adverbs, which is essential for sounding fluent and precise in English. Making mistakes also encourages you to expand your vocabulary. For instance, if you want to say, "I am very tired," but you accidentally say, "I am very sleepy," a listener might suggest. You could also say exhausted. Each correction helps you learn new words and use them correctly. which gradually improves your fluency. Small mistakes improve your ability to form questions naturally. For example, you might ask, "Do you can help me?" instead of "Can you help me?" Correcting these small errors helps you use question structures automatically in conversation. Advanced learners often need this practice because question forms are used constantly in speaking. Mistakes also teach you how to handle misunderstandings politely. For example, if you say, "I misunderstood what you said about the project," the listener may explain again. Each time you navigate a misunderstanding, you learn to communicate effectively in real-life situations. This ability is essential for fluency and confidence. Making mistakes helps you think in English. For example, if you say, "I have 25 years," instead of "I am 25 years old," you are learning that English structures ideas differently from your native language. Each correction teaches your brain to think in English naturally, which is critical for advanced fluency. Small mistakes also teach you how to express emotions accurately. For example, you might say, "I am excited about the trip," instead of "I am excited about the trip." Every time you correct this mistake, you learn how to use adjectives that describe feelings properly. This improves your ability to communicate naturally and emotionally in English. Mistakes improve your ability to summarize information. For example, if you forget a word, you might describe it instead. You could say, "the place where you can borrow books," instead of saying "library." This skill allows you to communicate effectively even when you do not know every word. Advanced fluency relies on this flexibility. Making mistakes also improves your understanding of phrasal verbs. For example, you might say, "I turned off the music," correctly, but later say, "I turned up the music," when you mean to reduce the volume. Each correction teaches the multiple meanings of phrasal verbs, which is essential for advanced learners. Small mistakes help you improve your understanding of idioms. For instance, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun," instead of "I am feeling under the weather," correction teaches you the proper idiom. Learning idioms through mistakes helps you sound more natural in conversations. Mistakes also improve your fluency under time pressure. For example, if someone asks, "What did you do last weekend?" and you say, "I go to the park," instead of "I went to the park," the listener will understand. Over time, these small corrections teach you to speak quickly and correctly without hesitation. Making mistakes also helps you use formal and informal English appropriately. For instance, you might say, "I am very full," casually, but in a formal email you would say, "I have eaten enough." Learning through mistakes helps you adapt English to social and professional contexts. Small mistakes in vocabulary usage teach you subtle differences between words. For example, you might say, "I was boring at the party," instead of "I was bored at the party." Each correction improves accuracy and naturalness in your spoken and written English. Mistakes help you develop confidence. For example, even if you initially say, "I think this movie is very exciting," and correct it to, "I think this movie is very exciting," practicing and correcting builds confidence. Accepting mistakes as part of learning allows you to speak more freely. Making mistakes also teaches you problem solving in English. For instance, if you forget a word, you might explain it with other words. You could say, "the thing you use to write on paper," instead of saying pen. Over time, your ability to communicate effectively without knowing every word strengthens your fluency. Small mistakes also teach you to self-monitor and self-correct. For example, if you say, "He don't like football," and immediately correct it to, "He doesn't like football," your brain learns to spot and fix errors naturally. Self-monitoring is a key skill for advanced English speakers. Mistakes also help you develop a natural sense of rhythm in English sentences. For example, if you say, "I am very happy for you," but stress the words incorrectly, it might sound unusual to a native speaker. If someone corrects your stress, or if you notice it yourself, you learn to place emphasis naturally. Over time, your English begins to sound more melodic and fluent. Small mistakes teach you how to use linking words correctly. For example, you might say, "I went to the market," "I bought apples," "I went home," instead of "I went to the market," and "I bought apples before I went home." Correcting these mistakes helps you connect ideas smoothly, which is essential for advanced learners who want to sound fluent. Making mistakes also improves your ability to use phrasal verbs creatively. For instance, you might say, "I ran into my friend yesterday," meaning you met them by chance. If you incorrectly say, "I ran over my friend yesterday," a listener may correct you. Each correction teaches the exact meaning and usage of phrasal verbs, which are crucial for fluent, natural English. Small mistakes also help you improve your understanding of modal verbs. For example, if you say, I can to help you, instead of, I can help you, repeated correction teaches proper modal verb usage. Over time, using modals like can, could, should, and must becomes natural, which is important for expressing ability, obligation, or possibility. Mistakes also teach you to handle tense consistency. For instance, if you say, yesterday I go to the park and I am playing football, instead of, yesterday I went to the park and played football, correcting these errors strengthens your understanding of past tense usage. Maintaining tense consistency is essential for clear and fluent English. Making mistakes also improves your ability to describe experiences accurately. For example, if you say, the movie was very interesting, instead of, the movie was very interesting, correcting this mistake allows you to describe events and experiences more precisely. Accurate descriptions make your English more engaging and fluent. Small mistakes also teach you how to negotiate meaning in conversation. For example, if someone does not understand you because you said, I am boring today, instead of, I am bored today, you have the opportunity to rephrase and clarify. This skill is essential for fluent communication in real-life conversations. Mistakes also help you improve your understanding of word order in English. For instance, if you say, yesterday went I to the park, instead of, yesterday I went to the park, each correction reinforces the natural word order. Over time, forming correct word order becomes automatic. Making mistakes also teaches you to experiment with different ways of saying the same thing. For example, if you forget the word delighted, you might say, I am very happy about the results, which is correct. Experimenting with language helps you find multiple ways to express ideas naturally. Small mistakes improve your ability to use collocations correctly. For instance, you might say, make a photo, instead of, take a photo. Each correction teaches the natural word combinations, which are essential for sounding fluent and avoiding awkward phrasing. Mistakes also help you develop the skill of paraphrasing. For example, if you forget the word astonished, you might say, I was very surprised by the news, which is correct. Paraphrasing allows you to communicate effectively even when you do not know every word, and it strengthens fluency. Making mistakes also helps you improve your ability to use idiomatic expressions accurately. For example, if you say, I am feeling under the sun, instead of, I am feeling under the weather, the correction teaches proper usage. Using idioms correctly makes your English sound natural and native-like. Small mistakes teach you to adapt your English to tone and formality. For instance, you might say, I am very full in a casual conversation, but in a formal context you would say, I've eaten enough for today. Each correction teaches you how to adjust language for social or professional situations. Mistakes also improve your ability to self-correct during real conversations. For example, if you say, he don't like football, and immediately correct it to, he doesn't like football, your brain trains itself to notice errors and fix them naturally. This skill is crucial for advanced learners who want to speak fluently without constant external correction. Making mistakes teaches you how to use advanced vocabulary accurately. For example, if you say, the performance was astonishing good, instead of, the performance was astonishingly good, repeated correction teaches proper adverbial usage. Mastering vocabulary usage is essential for confident, fluent speech. Small mistakes also help you develop confidence in spontaneous speaking. For example, even if you initially say, I think this movie is very exciting, and correct it to, I think this movie is very exciting, practicing and correcting builds confidence. Accepting mistakes as part of learning encourages frequent speaking, which is critical for fluency. Mistakes also teach you how to describe complex ideas more clearly. For instance, if you forget a word while speaking, you might say, the tool that we use to measure temperature, instead of thermometer. Explaining ideas in different ways helps you communicate effectively even when vocabulary is limited. Small mistakes improve your ability to negotiate meaning in listening situations. For example, if someone says, I am swamped with work, and you reply, you are drowned in work, instead of, you are overwhelmed with work, the correction teaches you proper idiomatic expression and listening comprehension. Making mistakes also strengthens your ability to tell stories in English. For example, if you say, I yesterday go to the park and I see a dog, instead of, yesterday I went to the park and I saw a dog. Correcting these mistakes helps you tell events in the correct order. Storytelling is an essential skill for fluency. Small mistakes also improve your ability to express opinions accurately. For example, you might say, I agree with you, instead of, I agree with you. Each correction strengthens your understanding of verbs that follow specific patterns, which is important for advanced communication. Mistakes teach you to use adjectives and adverbs correctly. For example, you might say, I am boring with this task, instead of, I am bored with this task. Repeated correction reinforces proper usage, allowing you to describe situations and emotions fluently. Making mistakes helps you improve your ability to adapt English in different contexts. For example, if you say, I am very happy casually, but in a formal email, you might say, I am delighted with the results. Mistakes teach you the nuances of register and formality, which are key for advanced learners. Small mistakes also improve your ability to summarize information in English. For instance, if you forget the word library, you might say, the place where you borrow books instead. This skill allows you to communicate effectively even when your vocabulary is limited, strengthening fluency. Mistakes teach you to use question forms correctly. For example, you might say, do you can help me with this task? Instead of, can you help me with this task? Repeated correction helps you ask questions accurately and naturally in conversation. Making mistakes improves your ability to think quickly in English. For instance, if someone asks, what did you do yesterday? And you forget the past tense of go, you might say, I go to the cinema yesterday. Correcting it to, I went to the cinema yesterday, teaches your brain to respond quickly and correctly under pressure. Small mistakes also teach you how to use complex sentence structures. For example, you might say, I went to the store. I bought apples. I went home. Instead of, I went to the store, bought apples, and then went home. Correcting these mistakes helps you link ideas naturally, improving fluency. Small mistakes also teach you to use linking phrases effectively. For example, if you say, I went to the park. I saw my friend. We played football, instead of, I went to the park and I saw my friend, so we played football. Correcting these mistakes teaches you how to connect ideas smoothly. Linking words like and, but, so, because, and however make your speech flow naturally. Mistakes help you develop precision in vocabulary. For instance, if you say, the movie was nice, instead of, the movie was fascinating, being corrected encourages you to choose words that convey the exact meaning. Using precise vocabulary allows you to express ideas clearly and impressively. Making mistakes improves your ability to use phrasal verbs correctly in different contexts. For example, you might say, I looked after the answer, instead of, I looked up the answer. Phrasal verbs often have multiple meanings, and small mistakes give you opportunities to practice their correct use naturally. Small mistakes also strengthen your understanding of conditionals. For instance, if you say, if I will go to the party, I see my friends, instead of, if I go to the party, I will see my friends. Correcting the sentence helps you internalize the grammar. Using conditionals correctly is important for expressing possibilities, plans, and hypothetical situations. Mistakes improve your ability to use descriptive language. For example, if you say, the weather is good, instead of, the weather is absolutely beautiful today, being corrected teaches you how to use adjectives and adverbs for richer description. Advanced learners sound more fluent when they describe things vividly and accurately. Making mistakes helps you practice expressing opinions clearly. For instance, you might say, I agree with you, instead of, I agree with you. Correcting errors like this ensures that you can share ideas confidently and fluently in conversation. Small mistakes teach you how to use verb tenses correctly in complex sentences. For example, if you say, yesterday I go to the market and buy vegetables, instead of, yesterday I went to the market and bought vegetables. Correcting these mistakes strengthens your understanding of past tense verbs. Using tenses accurately is crucial for clear storytelling and communication. Mistakes also improve your listening skills. For instance, if someone says, I am thrilled with the results, and you hear, I am filled with the results, realizing the error forces you to focus more closely. Each correction strengthens your listening comprehension and helps you understand native speakers more easily. Making mistakes encourages you to expand your vocabulary through alternatives. For example, if you forget the word astonished, you might say, I was very surprised by the news, which is correct. Using synonyms and paraphrasing expands your vocabulary and improves your ability to communicate fluently. Small mistakes also teach you to ask questions naturally. For example, you might say, "You can help me with this problem?" instead of, "Can you help me with this problem?" Repeated corrections help you form questions correctly and respond appropriately in conversations. Mistakes help you think critically in English. For instance, if you write, "I am interested in learning languages," instead of, "I am interested in learning languages," reflecting on the error teaches you grammar and sentence structure. Advanced learners benefit greatly from this kind of reflection because it strengthens independent use of English. Making mistakes builds your confidence in speaking spontaneously. For example, if you initially say, "I think this movie is very exciting," and correct it to, "I think this movie is very exciting," repeated practice reinforces confidence. Accepting mistakes as part of learning encourages you to speak more often, which improves fluency. Small mistakes also teach you how to explain ideas clearly when vocabulary fails. For instance, if you forget the word thermometer, you might say, "The tool we use to measure temperature," instead. Explaining ideas differently strengthens your ability to communicate even when you lack specific vocabulary. Mistakes improve your understanding of idiomatic expressions. For example, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun," instead of, "I am feeling under the weather," corrections help you internalize proper usage. Idioms are an essential part of sounding fluent, and making mistakes accelerates learning. Making mistakes also teaches you how to manage tense consistency in speech and writing. For example, if you say, "I'm going to the store yesterday," instead of, "I went to the store yesterday," correcting these errors reinforces natural use of past, present, and future tenses. Correct tense usage is essential for clear communication. Small mistakes improve your ability to use formal and informal English appropriately. For example, you might say, "I am very full," in casual conversation. But in a formal context, you might say, "I have eaten enough." Each correction teaches you the nuances of register, which is vital for professional and social interactions. Mistakes help you develop fluency in storytelling. For example, if you say, "I yesterday go to the park and I see a dog," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the park and saw a dog," correcting these mistakes teaches how to narrate events in proper order. Storytelling is a critical skill for conversational fluency. Making mistakes strengthens your ability to describe emotions accurately. For example, if you say, "I am excited about the trip," instead of, "I am excited about the trip," each correction reinforces the correct use of adjectives. Accurately describing emotions makes your English more expressive and natural. Small mistakes teach you how to handle misunderstandings politely. For instance, if someone says, "I meant that we should start earlier," and you misinterpret it, correcting your understanding and response allows you to communicate more effectively. Advanced learners need this skill for smooth, real-life conversations. Mistakes also help you practice linking ideas in complex sentences. For example, if you say, "I went to the park," "I played football," "I went home," instead of, "I went to the park, played football, and then went home." Corrections teach you how to connect multiple ideas fluently. Linking ideas is essential for advanced storytelling and explanations. Making mistakes teaches you to use phrasal verbs correctly under pressure. For example, if you say, "I ran over my friend yesterday," instead of, "I ran into my friend yesterday," being corrected strengthens your understanding of phrasal verbs' nuances. Phrasal verbs are crucial for natural, fluent English. Small mistakes also improve your ability to form negative sentences accurately. For example, if you say, "I don't know the answer," instead of, "I don't know the answer," correcting the mistake reinforces subject-verb agreement. Advanced learners need precise grammar for clear and confident communication. Mistakes help you develop strategies to communicate when unsure. For example, if you forget the word library, you might say, "The place where we borrow books," instead. This skill allows you to maintain conversation fluency even when your vocabulary is incomplete. Making mistakes strengthens your ability to paraphrase ideas. For example, if you forget the word astonished, you might say, "I was very surprised," which conveys the same meaning. Paraphrasing helps advanced learners communicate naturally without relying on a single vocabulary word. Small mistakes improve your understanding of sentence stress and intonation. For example, if you say, "I am very happy for you," but emphasize the wrong words, a listener might correct you. Practicing stress and intonation naturally makes your speech sound fluent and native-like. Mistakes also teach you how to adapt English to different social and cultural contexts. For example, saying, "I am very full" is fine with friends, but in a professional email you might say, "I have eaten enough for today." Learning this adaptation through mistakes improves your fluency in real-life communication. Small mistakes also help you learn how to use complex sentence structures naturally. For example, if you say, "I went to the park, I saw my friend, we played football," instead of, "I went to the park, saw my friend, and we played football," the correction helps you connect multiple ideas in one sentence. Linking sentences like this makes your English sound smoother and more fluent. Making mistakes also strengthens your understanding of prepositions. For example, you might say, "I am good in English," instead of, "I am good at English." Each correction reinforces proper preposition use, which is essential because prepositions in English often do not follow logical rules and are learned best through experience. Mistakes also teach you how to use conditional sentences effectively. For instance, if you say, "If I will go to the party, I see my friends," instead of, "If I go to the party, I will see my friends," correcting it reinforces the correct order of tenses and conditionals. Using conditionals correctly allows you to talk about possibilities, plans, and hypothetical situations naturally. Small mistakes help you improve your pronunciation and rhythm. For example, if you say comfortable as comfortable instead of comfortable, correcting the stress pattern teaches you how to pronounce words naturally. Over time, practicing these small corrections helps your speech flow smoothly and become easier to understand. Making mistakes improves your vocabulary and word choice. For instance, if you say, "The movie was nice," instead of, "The movie was fascinating," learning to choose more precise words enhances your ability to express yourself clearly and accurately. Using specific words makes your English sound advanced and confident. Small mistakes also teach you how to use phrasal verbs correctly. For example, if you say, "I ran over my friend," instead of, "I ran into my friend," correcting the mistake reinforces the correct meaning of phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are commonly used in spoken English, so mastering them is key to sounding natural. Mistakes help you refine your use of modal verbs. For instance, if you say, "I can to help you," instead of, "I can help you," correcting it strengthens your understanding of how modal verbs work. Modals like can, could, should, and must are essential for expressing ability, permission, obligation, and possibility in advanced English. Making mistakes also improves your ability to tell stories clearly. For example, if you say, "Yesterday I go to the store and buy apples," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the store and bought apples." Correcting these mistakes helps you narrate events in proper order. Storytelling is essential for fluent conversation and writing. Small mistakes improve your ability to describe experiences vividly. For instance, if you say, "The weather is good," instead of, "The weather is absolutely beautiful today," correcting it helps you learn how to use descriptive adjectives and adverbs. Using precise and vivid language makes your English more engaging and advanced. Mistakes also teach you how to form questions correctly. For example, if you say, "Do you can help me?" instead of, "Can you help me?" Repeated correction strengthens your ability to ask questions naturally in conversation. Asking questions correctly is vital for interacting confidently with native speakers. Making mistakes teaches you how to paraphrase and explain ideas. For example, if you forget the word library, you might say, "the place where we borrow books," instead. Being able to explain ideas differently allows you to maintain fluency even when your vocabulary is incomplete. Small mistakes help you understand idiomatic expressions better. For instance, if you say, "I am feeling under the sun," instead of, "I am feeling under the weather," correcting it helps you internalize the proper idiom. Idioms are frequently used in daily conversations, and mastering them through mistakes helps you sound natural. Mistakes also teach you to adapt your English according to social context. For example, saying, "I am very full" is fine with friends, but in a formal email you might say, "I have eaten enough for today." Learning context-specific language helps advanced learners communicate appropriately in every situation. Making mistakes improves your ability to self-correct while speaking. For instance, if you say, "he don't like football," and quickly correct it to, "he doesn't like football," your brain learns to monitor speech automatically. Self-correction is a crucial skill for fluent English speakers because it allows you to speak confidently without hesitation. Small mistakes also help you expand your vocabulary. For example, if you say, "I am very happy," but someone suggests, you could also say "delighted." Learning alternatives strengthens your language variety. Using a broader vocabulary allows you to express yourself precisely and sound more advanced. Mistakes teach you how to handle misunderstandings politely. For example, if someone says, "I meant we should start earlier," and you misunderstand, asking for clarification allows you to communicate more effectively. Advanced learners use these situations to practice active listening and clear responses. Making mistakes strengthens your ability to narrate events with proper sequence. For instance, if you say, "I yesterday go to the park and see a dog," instead of, "Yesterday I went to the park and saw a dog," corrections teach you how to structure narratives logically. Sequencing events correctly is important for fluency in conversation and writing. Small mistakes improve your understanding of verb forms. For example, if you say, "I have went to the market," instead of "I have gone to the market," repeated corrections reinforce the proper use of irregular verbs. Accurate verb forms are essential for advanced grammar and natural speech. Making mistakes also helps you practice linking ideas and using transition words. For instance, if you say, "I went to the store," "I bought apples." "I went home," instead of "I went to the store, bought apples, and then went home." Correction teaches you to connect ideas naturally. Using transitions makes your speech and writing more fluent. Small mistakes teach you how to describe emotions accurately. For example, if you say, "I am exciting about the trip," instead of "I am excited about the trip," repeated correction helps you use adjectives correctly. Being able to describe emotions naturally is a key part of advanced fluency. Mistakes also teach you how to use advanced vocabulary appropriately. For instance, if you say, "The performance was astonishing good," instead of "The performance was astonishingly good," correcting it strengthens your understanding of adverb placement. Proper word choice enhances your ability to communicate sophisticated ideas clearly. Making mistakes improves your ability to adapt English to different registers. For example, saying, "I am very full" is casual, but in a formal email you might say, "I have eaten enough." Understanding register and context is critical for advanced learners who want to communicate naturally in professional and social settings. Small mistakes also help you practice summarizing information in English. For instance, if you forget the word library, you might say, "the place where we borrow books" instead. Summarizing and explaining in this way allows you to maintain fluent communication even when vocabulary is incomplete. Mistakes help you develop critical thinking in English. For example, if you write, "I am interested in learning languages," instead of "I am interested in learning languages," reflecting on the mistake reinforces grammar and sentence structure. Advanced learners improve their ability to analyze language patterns through this process. Making mistakes also improves your fluency under pressure. For instance, if someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" and you say, "I go to the cinema yesterday," correcting it to "I went to the cinema yesterday," helps you learn to respond quickly and accurately in real-life conversations.